Welcome to my third Climate Crisis web broadcast. This is one of the most important programs ever about a critical piece of legislation currently pending in Congress. We need to call Congress 202-224-3121 and ask your representative to pass this legislation. After that, I'll take you on a journey through the Tongass National Forest, the largest old-growth forest in America, under assault by clear-cutting. We are subsidizing this clear-cutting with our taxpayer dollars. A critical climate change bill is now being considered by Congress. It is imperative that you call your representative at 202-224-3121 and urge them to vote for the American Climate and Energy Security Act to invest in clean, renewable energy and combat climate change. Please ask them to keep the target of 20% reduction by 2020 rather than letting it weaken, as Representative Dick Boucher, a Democrat of Virginia, is trying to do. Scientists like James Hansen, senior scientist with NASA, warn that we need to get below 350 parts per million carbon dioxide. We are currently at 387 parts per million and increasing at more than 2 parts per million per year at an accelerating rate. The rate of increase in emissions rose from under 1% per year in the 1990s to 3.5% per year last year. Thus, a 20% reduction by 2020 is not enough of a reduction. There is a huge gap between the need for our planet and the political will to change. But this act is a critical first step to make the change from increasing to decreasing emissions at a significant rate. The legislation uses a cap-and-trade system that is critical to making sure that emissions do not go higher as a carbon tax might do. It is also more popular. A cap-and-trade system distributes credits to produce carbon to energy producers. How the credits are distributed is an open question, with room to compromise in the legislation, said bill sponsor Ed Markey, a Democrat of Massachusetts. Funds through auctioning the credits can go towards grants to produce renewable energy. If an allocation method is used, credits are given to energy producers. They can then sell the credits to other energy producers. Thus, a coal-fired power plant, which would produce more carbon than the credits they are given, would have to purchase more credits from wind farms, solar power plants, and waste methane electric generation plants. The principal mechanism of the legislation of forcing a reduction in emissions, then using the free market to allocate the right to emit carbon, is likely the least expensive way to achieve the goals of the legislation. Without this system, we could be like Canada in pledging to reduce emissions, then just ignoring the targets. This is how we reduced acid rain pollution exponentially cheaper than the coal industry said it was possible. Permits to emit acid rain causing pollution like sulfur dioxide is traded on the free market. While this can create areas of increased acid rain, such as my southeast Ohio home, and areas where the coal industry buys extra permits to pollute, with climate change this is not an issue. Greenhouse gas emissions affect global temperatures, so finding the least cost way to achieve reductions means that the greatest possible reductions can be made. It also uses American ingenuity and the American entrepreneurial creativity to solve this problem in the best possible manner that spawns new technologies that can be marketed globally to both spur the economy and help reduce emissions. Wave and tidal energy are both very promising, as is geothermal and large-scale solar using mirrors concentrating light on boilers that generate electricity. Wind farms, both onshore and in lakes and oceans, are the most promising energy source with minimal impacts. I find them aesthetically pleasing, a visible sign of progress that I like to watch as I travel past. Still, It is energy efficiency that is the lowest hanging fruit, exponentially cheaper than any fuel source. It also reduces our utility bills. Nationally, this will greatly help our economy by greatly reducing the $700 billion that leaves our country every year to buy foreign oil. But it is the climate crises that should be our key motivator to constantly contact our elected officials, demanding that they vote in favor of this legislation. Remind them that it is an issue that will determine how you vote in the next election. This is the most important climate change legislation in the history of the United States. Few understand the real magnitude of this crisis, with top scientists like James Lovelock warning that billions of people could lose their lives and the majority of species could die this century unless major changes are made. Floods, hurricanes that dwarf Katrina, droughts, heat waves, forest fires, landslides from torrential rains, increased tornado strength and numbers threaten global instability. The United States Pentagon found that climate change vastly eclipses the threat of terrorism in a 2004 report that the Bush administration tried to censor. The Pentagon warned of abrupt climate change, as we are seeing with the massive loss of sea ice in the Arctic in 2007, vastly greater than the worst-case scenarios of climate models. The key is to make the change, and this legislation is critical to beginning to turn the tide from increasing emissions to decreasing emissions. Please call your representative 202-224-3121 and ask your congressperson to vote in favor of this legislation. After that, contact your senators and ask them to vote in favor of this legislation. Next, I will take you on a journey through the Tongass National Forest, the largest old-growth forest in the United States. But this forest is under assault by clear-cut logging that is subsidized with our taxpayer dollars. It is also the subject of my upcoming 5th book about an amazing journey that I had through the area by foot, kayak, ferry, Greenpeace boat, and Greenpeace helicopter. After touring the forest, I went up to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. This was my 3rd expedition to Alaska, and for this journey I took the train from my Ohio home to Toronto, Canada, then all the way across to the west coast at Prince Rupert, British Columbia. From there, I took the ferry to Ketchikan, Alaska in the Tongass National Forest. The Tongass National Forest is the largest of our national forests, about 17 million acres. It is comprised of 26,000 islands, an amazing wilderness. People are allowed to camp and hike throughout this forest.